Hi everyone, this week we're making a beautiful twisted fabric wreath. We need to create 3 tubes, one from each of the fabrics. The fabric needs to be cut at 6 inches by 44 inches, which is a standard width of fabric. I've already gone ahead and made up 2 of the tubes. I'll be making the last one to show you the process. You'll also need a piece for the bow, cut at 8 inches by the width of the fabric, and a smaller piece measuring 3 by 15 inches. Open up the fabric and fold it over on its longest edge so that the right sides are facing. Pin it if you need to. I'm just going to pop one in. Sew down that long edge using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Let's run the video forward a little bit. Now we need to turn the fabric right way out using, well, you can use whatever method you prefer. For this one, I'm just going to pop in a safety pin into one end and I'm going to feed it through. Let's run it forward a little bit. And there we go. Remove the safety pin, and then we need to fill the tube with stuffing. You can sew one end closed, but leaving both open means it's easier to stuff from both ends rather than having to force the stuffing all the way through the tube to the other end. Just saves you a little bit of time. A chopstick or a straw, a metal one, will work really well for pushing the stuffing through the tube. I'm going to run it forward again because this process takes a little bit of time. See, even sped up, it takes a while. Getting there. Right, once you've filled the tube, go ahead and sew one end closed, ensuring that that seam in the fabric is actually towards the back and it's centred. Right, just trim this. So there's my 3 tubes. The other end is simply clipped in place. This is to allow us to braid it, twist the fabrics together to double check that they're braiding okay, that they look okay once they're braided. To check the stuffing, use a safety pin to connect all the 3 tubes at the other end. Sorry, other end, at one of the ends. Okay, and now we braid. So left over centre, right over centre, sorry, left over centre, right over centre, and repeat. And just keep doing that until you get to the end. We want them to be snug but not tight. There needs to be a little bit of movement to allow for curling into a circle later. That's the point of checking before we close up the other end in case we need to remove or add any more stuffing. Okay, so when you get to the end, grab hold of all the 3 tubes and bend at both ends so that each end meets. That will form your wreath. Just try that one more time. And curl. Yep, I'm happy with that. Yeah. Right, so the next thing you need to do, once you're happy with the way it forms into a ring, is carefully pinch the seams of each of those tubes together, individually, not all together, and top stitch each of them closed. I had zero clue at this point that the entire thing was being filmed off camera. I'm really sorry. But you are literally closing up those open ends. Oh, that red tube did not want to stay out of the way. Rebraid where they've been moved to stitch, then pop in a safety pin through all three, just like you did on the other end, just to keep them together. So both ends are now secured together with pins. We need to make this more permanent. You can try to sew through all layers on your machine, but I opted to hand sew them in place. Now, my thread did actually break doing this, and I wish I'd have used extra strong thread. It would have made it easier. Lesson learned for next one. Let's run this forward. When you get to the end, curve the other end of the wreath around so that they meet, and continue sewing until they're both ends are securely connected together. If you're going to get a thread breakage, it's going to be at this point. If you don't have extra strong thread, I would suggest actually squeezing the fabrics together as you sew, rather than pulling on the thread itself. And now for the bow. This is the reason that I routinely have to stop midway through a project. Meet Heidi, who sat here with her back to me for 10 minutes, completely ignoring me before being enticed away by the meowing of her big sister outside, wanting in. Cats. Back to it. For this part, you'll need your 8x44 inch piece and your 3x15 inch piece. Just checking my measurements here. So take the larger piece and fold it across its longest edge, right sides together. Sew down that edge using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but stop partway down and backstitch. You'll see what I mean in a moment. In fact, what I'll do is I'll pop in a couple of pins, one to show where I'm going to stitch to, at which point you want to backstitch, and the other to show where I'm going to restart stitching from. So down to the first one and backstitch a little, then needle up, move the fabric down to the second pin, and start again, backstitching in a little where the pin is, or was. It's just to reinforce the opening so that when you go to turn it out you don't pull your stitches away. And continue sewing all the way to the end. And backstitch at that end as well. So you're left with an opening in the middle for turning out. Don't turn it out just yet. As you can see, I was about to. Instead, what we want to do, smooth that fabric out. You can press it if you want to. And with the fabric laid in front of you, fold down both ends, as you can see me doing here. On the outer edge of both pieces, mark up 5 inches. And then from that mark down to the opposite corner, mark a line. Do that on both pieces. Now we're going to sew down both those lines. Okay, one more. Now trim past that line by 1/4 inch, so that you're only left with a 1/4 inch, of fabric past your sew line. Okay, now clip the corners. Clip these well. I don't actually take enough off these. That one is perfectly fine. The one in the corner there, you want to swoop around the point. Don't just chop the point off. It won't turn out properly. Okay, now we can turn it all out the right way round. Say, if you've clipped the corners properly, you'll be able to poke out the corners really well. I didn't trim them enough, so my bad. and tug at either side of that opening so that the fabric pulls inside. Then top stitch this closed. Obviously use a thread that will blend in. I'm using a grey in mine simply because it was what was in the machine and I needed it to be visible. I needed all the stitches through the video to be visible. Clip off any excess thread. You're eventually going to want to lay out this main piece in this orientation. Why I chose to do it at this point when I've then got to move it out of the way, I'm not sure. So set that aside. Take your 3 by 15 inch piece now, and again fold it across the longest edge so that the right sides are together. Sew down that longest edge, again use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And again, using the safety pin method, turn the fabric right way out. The thinner the tube, the more awkward this is, but it does work. You just need to have a little bit of patience. A chopstick or a metal straw would have probably worked better for this one. We do have some turning tools on order, which will hopefully arrive in the next week or so. Ha, gotcha. There we go. So remove that safety pin. Then roll that seam to the back so that it sits in the centre. And we're simply going to top stitch the both ends closed. You can, of course, roll in a little of the fabric and stitch it, or even hand stitch it if you prefer, but they're not really going to be seen anyway, so trim that down as close to the stitch line as you can, or even better, use a pair of pinking shears just to trim off the end. Right, now we need to get the bow onto the wreath. So lay the bow out, fabric out as I showed you before, as you can see now, and lift it onto the wreath so that the middle, like that, so that the middle is over the area that you stitched the wreath together, the two ends of the wreath. Take your centrepiece and wrap it around so that the ends are at the back of the wreath. Holding that tightly, flip it over and tie it. You'll then want to push the ends between the tubes of fabric, but make sure that they're not seen from the front. That. Flip it back over and adjust the ribbon, the bow, sorry, until you're happy with it. And that's it. I love me a bit of Christmas sewing. If you like the video, please consider hitting the like button and maybe subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, happy sewing.